Sorry, not sorry. Hey, Brylan, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going tonight?
Good. Hey, Bluid, what's going on, man?
I don't know where I am.
Hey, Mocha, what's shake-a-lakin'?
Never been worse.
Right? And welcome to the Down in Front podcast last call segment. What we usually do here is talk about movies, TV shows, all while having a drink. Tonight, we are going to give you a premiere of the Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 1, titled Winterfell. We're going to cut out all the fluff. So if you haven't seen the actual episode, what's wrong with you? Go to Facebook, find my name, and unfriend me because I hate your guts. What we're going to be doing is talking about a bunch of different topics that we'll mention next. But what I want to do is actually mention our final an amazing guest who's the first time on our podcast. Is this your first podcast ever?
This is my first podcast ever.
Woo! Woo-hoo. We are popping cherries everywhere. I want to give a quick shout out to Mr. Cuthbert, or as you may know him, CJ. What's going on, man? It's great to see your face. I'm glad that this is your first podcast ever, so we are ever so grateful to be talking about Game of Thrones. What is your favorite movie of 2019, and what are you currently sipping on tonight?
Wow. So I have not seen a movie this year yet, which is really terrible. I need to get on that fast. However, I am drinking winter blend of Down East because winter is here, and I hope you all are ready.
Nice. I'm glad that you actually stuck to theme because I did. So good stuff. So I'm pumped. So we're going to get into it. Let's actually talk about it. I think the best that we're going to is talk about a couple of different characters. And so we're going to go down the list really quickly, but we're actually going to start by talking about the opening credits. As we usually do, I'm going to toss it over to Brylan, kind of start us off. But we'll talk about the opening credits. Then we're going to go to Jon, Dany, Sansa, Tyrion, and then we'll go down the list after that. So, Brylan, open it off and tell me overall thoughts and feelings of the episode for season episode 1. What do you think of the opening credits?
Well, since this is the last season, I like that they changed up the opening credits a bit. I like that they feel a bit more epic because the story definitely needs to wrap up in a very epic fashion. So I like that we didn't travel around the map to many cities. It kind of narrowed down to this is good versus evil. Here's King's Landing. Here's Winterfell. Also, let's show the throne rooms off too. And so I thought it was really cool that they added this little extra CG that added a bit more personality to these points of interest we've seen on the map before.
Yeah, I was actually kind of bummed because I actually didn't even realize that something had changed because I was so tired from Sunday when I watched it. So I just recently watched it twice today. But I actually loved it. I'm glad that they actually kind of changed it up, especially kind of going inside and seeing it almost as if it was like a risk board. Certain points, but then it was also kind of pretty interesting to kind of tell. Blew it?
Well, I was going to say, so it was a small set kind of thing. I was actually talking about this during the middle of the episode. So the opening credits only show the locations that will be featured in the show. And so because the show was basically King's Landing, The Wall, and then Winterfell, that's why they kind of bounced around only between those three places. I do agree that the throne room was a nice twist. After 8 years, you got to do something different. I do want to shout out a little bit the people that animate these because, you edit the story. So you had 70 hours worth of, not 70 hours, 7 hours worth of content that you're going to release over these 6 episodes. And they slide things around, kind of depending on early results, producers, editors, like making different changes. And so they must be doing these credits remarkably late in the process. And to get the animation done that well, and most likely a pretty quick turnaround, is pretty awesome.
Mocha, what you got?
Yeah, like everybody said, the change in pace for the opening was pretty cool in general. It was a nice surprise for me. I've gotten so accustomed to the overarching worldview. But for me, it was kind of like a bit of a sad twinge to it because it really drove home the fact that this is all going to end in 5 episodes now. We're getting really close to the end, to the point where they're like, all right, well, let's just turn it up a bit even for the intro. So it was definitely a bittersweet moment.
I think it was. It made me sad, but it also made me excited that it is the end. I mean, at some point, you have to end at some point. And I'm glad that they actually had a chance to kind of show us something different. Even though we've seen the opening scrolls so many times, it still surprised me that they still can give us, and they can still do things that's that drastic and that different. So I didn't feel any sadness about it. I was actually more excited that people finally got a chance to change it up, because I'm sure somebody wanted to change it at some point.
Well, also, it's been so... Well, two things on that. First of all, like, you're not going to change the credits that much for the last season for such an established show. You know, like, you make that decision early and you keep to it. The other thing is, I kind of agree with you that it was pretty exciting. Like, I remember seeing the episode show up on the HBO Now app, and it was just, you know, we've been waiting so freaking long for this. It's been a year and a half since we've gotten any Game of Thrones, and just like grip on the couch and be like, oh my God, let's go. Because it, you know, I'm nothing but amped.
Yeah, if you guys didn't see that, there was this video, I think it was on Kit Harington's Instagram, where it was like this bar showing Game of Thrones, and it was literally just the like start of the theme. And everyone went nuts.
Yo, that's a Photoshop, dude. I saw the same thing.
Yeah.
It's for like a sports team winning a championship, but
it's still. I could still feel all that energy. Like, it's just. I was sitting there, and like Rosie was sitting there laughing at me because he's like, "Why are you so amped?" I'm like, "This is an incredible moment of this final season of such an epic show." I was just so excited for it.
Yeah, and so I do want to kind of get into that, CJ, because we've all talked about it. We have recorded many episodes. I can even go back and probably don't remember half the episodes that we recorded on Game of Thrones because we were so excited. Let's put it that way. CJ, so what is your sort of bit of a background in there? And, you know, going into the season 8, what were you sort of expecting for like the opening credits and the start of the show?
So I think for me, having watched all 7 seasons in such a condensed period of time, I hadn't seen an episode until probably mid-February. And so starting from there and just like binge watching all the way up to the like end of season 7 with like 2 weeks before season 8, I was just like, oh my God, like this story is amazing. I can't believe I've like stayed away from it for this long. Like, how could I have done this to myself? I feel like I did a disservice to myself. But just then I was like beyond excited for the fact that like this show's coming back. Now I'm like caught up with everyone else. Now I can begin to understand what it's like in that like lull between episodes, which I hadn't had before. Before it was just like, all right, everything is just boom, 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 boom. Now it's like, okay, now I have a week to talk about this episode with everyone who I know. It's just really, really exciting. In terms of like how I like graded this episode, I'm just thinking like, okay, it's like classic kind of tabletop setting episode, but at the same time, I was like, all right, I need more. But it was just so many things happening in this one episode.
So let's break down to a couple different characters. And so we'll kind of go, person by person, and we can definitely kind of mix in and kind of talk about a lot. But Brylan, start us off with talking about the Jon storyline as we've seen in Winterfell.
Yeah, so we see Jon get back to Winterfell after all the craziness that happened last season, and he's there with Daenerys, Auntie Daenerys, just rolling into Winterfell, and it's really cool to see just, regardless of all these crazy wars that have happened, that the North still keeps to their like mistrusting attitude towards any outsiders. So when they're coming through, it's really cool to see just the townsfolk just look at him like, all right, Jon, we trust you, but who is this lady type of deal. And it also brings up some really like interesting things about the political ideas behind what makes these people get rally behind these individuals. And so Sansa coming in like just telling Jon, like, hey, you probably made a huge mistake bringing a Targaryen here because you're the king in the North. You're the one that was actually chosen to be the king in the North, but you are now bowing the knee to an outsider. And how does that make you look towards the people you swore to defend? And to Jon, like, these titles aren't really mattering, but it's a really important point to think of, like, to know who is going to be the person in charge, who's going to be calling the shots. Is it one of your own, or is it going to be someone that you never met before and stuff? And that level of trust is something that I think will be really cool to see how they actually play out what Jon's role is going to ultimately be in this final showdown with the Night's King and the Whites.
You know, I really appreciate Jon's whole character and his whole sticking to his guns about how I didn't want this shit in the first place, so I don't really care that I'm not the king anymore. But you'd think that after doing the exact same thing and then getting stabbed to death, he might have like learned a lesson or two about being a bit more politically savvy. I feel like he's like setting himself up, or like trying to set himself up for a little bit of failure here. But yeah, we'll see.
I thought his downfall was being so honorable. Right. And I thought, at least for me, the way that I was feeling and what caused his death was he was trying to be like Ned. He was trying to be honorable. He was trying to do the right thing for people and the people that respect and trust him and put faith in him.
Yeah.
But then, now it's to the point where after he died, he said, fuck this. I'm trying to do what's best for everybody in this life. Like, it's no longer just being honorable, Ned Stark, right? It's just more about, I want to protect life. I want to protect the living. I can care less about all these titles. Doesn't mean shit to me. Like, I want to make sure that we survive with what to come. Yeah, Mocha?
So you're right in that his honor was a flaw that led to him ultimately having issues, but that's not what got him killed. What got him killed was the fact that he brought the wildlings over like beyond the wall to live and work alongside the members of the Night Watch, refused to take into account the centuries of distrust and racial animosity between them, and just said, well, this is what needs to happen anyway, so why does it matter? And then they all killed him. And that's exactly what's happening here. He's bringing a Targaryen right into Winterfell. Everyone's telling him, why are you doing this? This is kind of weird for you to just bring these people in. And he's saying, well, it doesn't matter because the dead are here, which is true, but it's still the same mentality in general from Jon.
Yeah, because if they win, which we don't know, but if they win, they're still going to have to deal with all this crap. And it's going to even be harder because their army is right next to your, in your same castle. Like, it's a complicated situation.
Yeah, but if they win, they're not. Yeah, but if they win, I mean, are you talking about the big battle, Bluid? Are you talking about like what? Like, are you talking about the end sequence, right? If humans win and beat the dead?
Yeah. Oh, well, I think that battle is going to take place a lot sooner in this season. I think it's going to be episode 3 that we get the Night's Watch. And then the last couple episodes will be like what happens after.
They just start fucking for 2 episodes.
Honestly, I would watch that. And then
Cersei is going to be the final boss of this show.
Oh,
the Night King is just here for the first half of the season.
I don't think it's going to be Cersei, but we can let's not get into theories too much because that's a whole big rabbit hole that we can talk about later.
That's another podcast.
I do want to say the whole aspect between Jon, I think they did a really good job playing off his quote unquote like honor, to underscore Daenerys. Has anyone looked at Daenerys as a bad guy?
She kind of is. Go ahead.
I was gonna say like this episode, especially that great scene with Tarly was like, yeah, you gotta think she's a warlord. She started off, she took control of this like, raging, pillaging group of people and basically did that in a more controlled manner. She's violent to no end, and I think the interesting thing that they can play off again on that is that Daenerys has this whole story about not being her father, and I think a lot of media will play with this where like, in the end destiny still arrives where like you try and break free of who your family or your friend group or location or whatever, but ultimately at the end that's still genetically part of you, and that in retrospect Daenerys is just Aegon the Conqueror. She might be trying to be a little nicer, but she's a conqueror, she's a warlord, she's burning people alive.
I can't agree with that of her being like a quote unquote bad guy. The only reason, really, just 2. 1, I don't think there's good and bad. I think they also like broke that up, right? There's nothing that we can be, that
King's pretty bad.
We don't even know who the Night King is. To be honest
hand out
with you,
flowers
bad
to
guy.
everybody.
I don't think there's for me, right? I don't think there's
We
good and bad at
just
all.
saw a tiny child like crucified to a wall
We never
around
know
a bunch
that
of limbs.
the Night King. Is that confirmed that the Night King did that?
Yeah, I mean, it's
think
probably,
We're
but
talking about a bunch of different things.
Because they've
Yeah, like,
done that
we
before.
don't quite know. Like we saw the Night King kill a couple people, and then we also saw the Night King kill a dragon. But I'm not saying that he's not bad. I'm not saying he's not good. I'm saying there is no good and bad. What I wanted to kind of defend on this point before we start talking about Dany later is the fact that she's been through some shit. In this episode, she was really plastered to be the bad guy, you know, quote unquote. But even though all the shit that she's done has been for good and to kind of rise and try to gather her, she hasn't done anything different, I guess, in my eyes. She hasn't done different than anything else people has done, besides Jon, who's a little bit different on that particular
right.
end.
But the point is that I think we spent the first 7 seasons thinking like, oh, she's like a good guy. She's going back to season 1 where people were trying to assassinate her, even though she was clearly like supposed to be 17, 18, somewhere in that range. I know she's younger in the books.
Oh, younger than that.
No, but I'm in the show. It's like plus 5 years. So I think she's supposed to be like 13 in the books and then 17, 18 in the TV show. But I think that it was a nice eye-opening experience that I never even considered that she was morally towards the gray aspect, because I'll agree with you. I think this show does a brilliant job of just having no actual bad guys besides from, you know, Ramsay Bolton and Joffrey and like the truly depraved characters, whereas everyone else is somewhat in the middle and somewhat survivalistic.
Or a force of nature.
Right.
I will say this, you know, this conversation about Daenerys being good or bad kind of kicked off with the idea of how she treated Samwell Tarly. And I think that like in a vacuum is an example of her being good. You know, she encountered Sam. She didn't know him. She didn't have any reason to be kind or nice to him, aside from maybe she knew that Jon knew him. I don't know. But he mentions, oh, I'm Sam Tarly, and my dad is, the Lord of whatever place, I can't remember right now. And she was like, oh, I killed him, and I killed your brother, and I'm going to say that without missing a beat because I respect you as a person, and you should know what happened to your family. And I think that's a really good example of Daenerys just being a good ruler, or at least wanting to be a good ruler. She wasn't plotting. She didn't stay quiet to figure out what's the best way I can play this character who doesn't know this information. And she was just like, it happened. I didn't want it to happen. It happened, and I did it. But you should know that.
Yeah,
I think
she wasn't expecting that other circumstance to go with the person that saved Jorah's life, just because Jorah's such a trusted friend. But I would have loved to hear whatever their conversation was after they talked to Sam and he left. If she just turned to Jorah, was just be like, "Oh Jesus, why was that so bad?" or something like that.
Honestly,
why couldn't someone tell Dany before, like, hey, like, there's someone here who's like dad and brother you burned? Like,
I don't think they knew.
I mean, the only people who knew were the ones that are in her retinue.
That actually did it.
And Brand,
Great word, by the way.
who chose
Mocha.
not to.
fuck Bran.
We're gonna get into Bran a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, I do think Bran's an asshole for not telling that his father and his
Bran's an
Sam's
asshole
father and
the
brother
whole
was
show.
burned alive.
But no, I thought that was more of a power play. You know, that was like a don't mess with me. I burned your dad and your brother alive, and they were bigger men than you.
I mean, we'll get into this a little bit later
I
on.
think
I do want to get back to
great at intimidation.
Yeah.
She brought the dragons to meet with the Lannisters. You know, it's like that's part of her shtick.
Speaking of dragons, can we bring it back to Jon and dragons?
Yeah,
That should have been a bigger moment.
That should have been a much larger moment. Like, considering, I keep talking about Daenerys, but Dany should be so fully aware of how important it is for someone to be a Targaryen to bond with a dragon. But she's like, oh, cool, whatever. Like, oh, you get to ride him.
I
It
guess.
was like
But here's the
someone's
thing.
family dog licks someone's hand. He's like, oh, he likes you. It's like,
I guess the thing that I was kind of bummed about, and this was probably, I mean, I've seen it everywhere. You know, I've started listening to other podcasts. I understand people are going to be bitching and complaining, and it's a legit gripe to have that they spent so much time just them riding dragons without actually showing the impact and why the ability to have Jon actually ride a dragon is so it's gigantic, right? It's huge. Yet they only focus on like the visual aspect and nothing else. And that what for me really, I just literally was like watching the episode and fast forwarded through that part because I'm like, I don't give a shit about this. Like that's really frustrating that you guys are trying to show me something without letting me know, hey, we all as the audience are really in on this already. We can care less about seeing some dragons. We've been seeing these dragons for a while. Like it's a big thing, and it should have been more impactful. Should have been more highlighted that Jon had the ability to ride the dragon, which was Drogon, right?
He rode Rhaegal.
No,
Yeah.
he rode Rhaegal.
Oh, okay.
He rode
So
the one named
Drogon
after his dad.
Drogon was the one giving him the stink eye,
Yeah.
right? He was
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's a set piece. It's weird because I think we'll find this in a lot of scenes in this season because they got to go through so much stuff. Is that we'll have these visual set pieces that they feel like they need to have in the season to wrap up the story visually. And I just feel like this scene is just out of place. I mean, Jon should have the revelation of knowing what his blood lineage is, and then after like whatever that fallout is, when Daenerys finds out about who Jon is, then you get your dragon riding scene, and it's set to a whole new world from Aladdin.
No, absolutely. This scene actually, and I highlights something that I think has been a concern of mine since I believe it was last season when the show finally surpassed the books. The guys who are behind it, Benioff and Weissman, I believe it's called, or
I think
Benioff and
Weiss.
Yeah, Benioff and Weiss. They're not that good at doing this stuff on their own. They were really good with adapting George R.R. Martin's material, and they did an excellent job with it. But once it came to time for them to take the ideas and put it into an actual story, I think their flaws started shining through, and I think this is a perfect example of that. You're right, Brylan. Like the dragon riding scene should have been much more significant. It shouldn't have been played off as her being like, "Hey, why don't you just hop on my dragon and like let's see what happens." He should have found out about his destiny, gone to like had a moment with the dragons, and then hopped on Rhaegal, the one that's named after his father that he in this imaginary future had just learned about, and rode him around, and then had that be a tension between him and Daenerys that he was able to ride her dragon without her permission or anything like that. Like that's much more interesting.
I don't think Dany lets him ride Rhaegal if she knows prior to this.
No.
Yeah.
No.
She definitely doesn't.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it should have been something done on his own, as opposed to being like her just being like, "Hey, like let's go for a dragon ride."
It almost seems like they shot this or that scene from an audience like perspective rather than a character perspective. Because in the audience, everyone knows that he's a Targaryen, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Targaryens ride dragons. It makes sense that he's going to go up there." Whereas, like, if they shot it from the character, Jon didn't react to it. He had more of a reaction when he was making out with Dany, and Drogon gave him the stink eye. It's like that's huge. You're the second person in living memory to ride a dragon. That's. I don't know. That scene irked me. Plus, it was super sappy and romantic, and I hate that crap anyways. But
I thought they would make so based on the trailer and seeing them flying. I thought that was going to be a larger plot point of them going beyond the wall based on the trailer, and then it to just be them going to like a secret hide spot to like have sex. Like that was such a letdown.
It was like a getaway weekend to Vermont.
Yeah.
That's what they did. It's like.
I agree. We're gonna continue to keep moving on with the kind of the Jon and talk about some characters, but I agree because I think one of the issues was it didn't make any sense why they did it. There was no payoff, there was no impact, and much like you were saying, Blue, they just put it in there because they know. Because we already know, but the characters have no fucking idea, and so his reactions are going to be weird, clunky, strange, kind of awkward, and it also feels very out of place. And it takes a long fucking time to show us that sequence when we could be, showing other characters who wasn't shown, like Gilly, like Brienne. It's kind of a bummer that they chose to put more focus on that when it had zero impact, instead of showing us how the characters that currently are in Winterfell are interacting with each other.
One quick thing before we move away from this. Kit Harington said in an interview about this episode that when they were filming the scene where he was riding the dragon, there's that moment where the dragon kind of banks to the side and he almost falls off. Well, in that moment on set, Kit Harington's balls got caught in the saddle of the buck that they were using, and he said that he was absolutely sure that his balls were going to get ripped off in that moment.
Oh my God, he almost had a Varys moment.
That's tough. All right, so one of the things that we do want to talk about John, because John interacts with just about every character except Tyrion in this, except a couple people, but John interacts with a lot of the people. So what else do you want to talk about John before we continue with Dany?
I would say probably one of my favorite moments of this episode was John meeting up with Arya again.
Yeah.
Just in being in front of the weirwood tree, just knowing like these two characters haven't been in the same room with one another since like episode 1, and to see them reconnect by talking about their swords and talking about like how John died, and just like being a little morose with their humor, but that's their connection, and they've always looked out for one another, and it was really cool to see that relationship get rekindled, and I want to see them work with that a bit in this season.
Yeah, I think her her comments just about how it's like, family you choose or whatever, that's gonna weigh heavily on his mind as we go forward, now that he knows that he's a Targaryen.
Yeah, that last line from Arya, that's like, don't forget what family you belong to.
Yep.
She says it like out of love, but also like, don't screw us or we're gonna take you out, especially the way Arya
that was a
is
threat.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
That was a straight up threat.
It was a lovable threat.
What I thought was interesting about John in this scene is that you get to really realize for the first time that everyone's been separated and gone to different corners of the world and had crazy adventures, but the one thing that differentiates John in that regard is that he's been extremely isolated from everything. He has just been up at the wall dealing with the Night's Watch. He gets mixed in with the wildlings. Eventually learns about the White Walkers, but for the most part, his worldview is really, really small. Everything's just happening to him. Whereas everybody else has had these interactions and these winding journeys where they've crossed paths with each other again or heard different things about each other. And so everybody else in his family knows just how different the world is, and is kind of hardened in a way that John isn't, because he returns to Winterfell and treats Sansa, Arya, Bran even to an extent as if he did the first moment or the moment he left them in the first place. And I feel like you can see that with his conversation with Sansa, with the way that he was surprised and the way Arya kind of touching. I don't think he realizes just how drastically the world has changed while he was up in the frozen north.
Which is ironic because his story is really the only one that matters. Ultimately, it's like, hey, we got to beat the Walking Dead over there.
So, anything else you guys want to talk about John before we talk about Dany and the rest of the characters?
Well, like the final scene with John and Sam in the catacombs, where he reveals that, hey, guess what? You're a Targaryen. You're not a bastard of the Stark family or anything. I think Kit Harington like played that as well as he could. I mean, I like that he didn't just like vomit after hearing that, like vomiting from banging his aunt or anything like that. But it was interesting to see that what his reaction was, that it was just like 1,000 emotions attacking him all at once. And he's like, I have to deal with this shit. Now I have to deal with this. Why are you doing this to me? So I just like it puts him in this area of uncertainty about himself again. But also, it's really cool because I think it brings up an idea that a lot of people never really thought about, which is Daenerys has had this kind of family ambition that she will sit on the Iron Throne. That's all her life has been devoted to, is reclaiming her family's legacy. And now that we have this other Targaryen in the mix, will we see Dany actually bend the knee to him, or what will be the outcome of that? I think it's really cool the way they leave it is like, we saw that you were willing to bend the knee to Dany. Is she willing to do the same to you? And that's going to bring up, I think, an interesting conflict that's got to get resolved, along with the giant White Walker army that's coming down on them.
Well, so one thing, I was just thinking about this. Why the hell do they do the dragon ride sequence? Because I think that was a great way to end the episode, right? Or excuse me, they had the one last little scene, which was awesome. But that was a great, last 5 minutes of the episode. Why didn't they do the dragon scene after that? Have the whole revelation and then have Jon know that going into it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Jon would be able to keep it together and not spill the beans to Dany. I think that's why they did it.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, the reveal is so jarring, and the amount of stuff, and I'll end it here, of the amount of things that they already give the actor Kit Harington, Jon, to do in this episode is astronomical. And the amount of shit that he has to just act through and just kind of he basically is not revealing, but he's basically responding with his face to all this shit that we've known for years. And he's like, oh shit. So I don't think it wouldn't have necessarily made sense for him to. I think the dragon sequence could have been completely cut entirely. I feel like that should have been removed from the entire episode.
I agree.
It's too happy. It's too bubbly. I feel like you can do a dragon riding episode when they actually fucking shit up and actually fighting. That would have been a bit more on the nose because they're actually getting ready for battle. That sequence felt too light, too Disney-esque, too out of place because it just wasn't supposed to be there. I think it also can't end it because there's so many things now that Jon has to figure out and has an internal struggle with. So I think that would have been a not quite the best way to kind of end it, but
yeah, I think that it's kind of odd because for me, that scene ending on Jon with the revelation that he is Aegon Targaryen, it's another weird one because that's something that the audience knows. The audience has already known that. And typically, when you end a TV show or movie or whatever with a cliffhanger, the surprise is something that the audience wasn't aware of, and you get to experience that shock right before it cuts to black. But in this one, it was we knew that going into it, we knew that Sam was going to tell him, and we knew that it was leading into it. So for them to end the episode as a big cliffhanger with just him learning this information that we already knew, kind of felt just like a weird way to play it. I kind of agree with I'm not sure if it was Blewett or Brylan who said it, but if he had learned that information and then encountered the dragon on his own and took that moment to try to ride the dragon, to fully accept that idea that, oh shit, I'm a Targaryen, and he flew off, and that was where the episode ended, with him flying the dragon and Dany seeing it and being shocked. That would have been a much more intense ending. But it was just weird for me from I feel like a story writing standpoint to just end the cliffhanger on something that we already knew and saw coming.
Well, I think the cliffhanger was that Sam finding out about his dad and brother before telling Jon, because I know I was like, oh shit, he has to tell him under these circumstances versus oh hey Jon, Grant and I were chatting and we discovered that you're actually Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar's son, versus you are the true king. You need to do something. I thought that was what the quote unquote cliffhanger was.
Yeah, but that happened last season though. That's what gets me.
But the way Sam told him is what I'm saying. Not necessarily we find out that he's Aegon. It's that Sam had to find out that his father and his brother died by Dany's hands or Drogon's hands, and now he's I know this, and I know Jon should be the true king. Now I'm going to tell Jon in this way. Versus...
It gives Sam's more pushing for Jon now to be the king rather than... And that there's going to be... Because Jon doesn't really do a ton of thinking for himself. So it kind of depends on the primary influencer. And if Sam's coming from a place of oh, la-di-da, versus, you need to do this. The other thing is that I view this episode as the, season premiere. Because it was. I don't have to view it. It just was the season premiere. But it is one of those things that it kind of encapsulates the end of the last season and then gives us the new storylines we're going to be chasing for this one. So to counter to kind of counter that, Mocha, that I don't think you needed to have a groundbreaking realization in the first episode, and shake the audience perspective. I think that we could kind of bask, and I think Warren said this, like bask in the very good acting performance that Jon Snow had, the range of emotions, and then kind of gives us a little bit of like, all right, well, I'm going to meet up with 4 of my friends and talk about it for an hour on what is his next move going to be. Where's his motivations and what is he going to do? I don't think it necessarily needs to be like some M. Night Shyamalan, twist. I will say though it was a better twist that I didn't see Jamie getting there so soon. And I thought that was a better way to end it with a little bit more intrigue.
I can't remember. I was like, I didn't think the episode ended with him on that reveal. I thought the episode ended for Bran waiting for his friend to come.
Yeah. His old friend. Waiting for an old friend.
His old good old buddy.
I will say this: if we're talking about like range of emotions being played on the face, got to give it up to Samuel Tarly, because that everything he went through dealing with Daenerys in that scene was fucking great. That guy's such a good actor.
And I just love that. Just to add a little bit to Sam, I like that scene with him and Jon. I love that the conversation of him explaining who Jon is to Jon comes about not from just him saying, "Oh, I got to tell you this important information," but from him feeling like getting an understanding of who Dany is as a leader versus who he knows Jon to be as a leader, and just asking that question, like, would you have done the same thing that she did?
Yeah, so, we talked about Jon a lot. We actually also talked about Dany, so I do want to talk about some of these characters that we haven't quite talked about so far. What do you guys feel of Sansa, also Sansa and Tyrion? Because they even had a bit of a moment, and they are still married. So I don't know if everybody kind of remember that. And so this is the first time since, I think we said Joffrey died, that they actually are in the same sort of...
Since the purple wedding.
Purple?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Oh. Sorry.
Oh, nice. There you go. No, you're good. No need to apologize for your knowledge, my friend. So what do you guys feel of Sansa and sort of Tyrion in at least this episode for right now? Especially the one thing that I know a lot of people were talking about was Tyrion's weird, mean-mugging look at the end of season 7 when Jon and Dany got it on. Rylan?
It was interesting to see with Sansa and Tyrion. I really liked that moment with them. It's good just to bring all these storylines that started so many seasons ago and kind of see them come back full circle. So I think it was a necessary moment to have, even if it's like the only moment we get, just to see where they at. I think it's really telling with Sansa that she's definitely one of the characters that's grown throughout the whole series. Like, you can go back to season 1 and she's this stupid little kid that just wants to marry a prince and be a queen one day and just have riches and wealth and fortune and live that carefree life. But we've seen that her life has definitely gone a different journey, and to go back to that and help her understand what she's learned versus what Tyrion's learned, it kind of puts him in a place that Sansa has become one of the smartest people in Westeros, and that Tyrion kind of has rested on his laurels, and that he hasn't really grown as much, and he's still is still trusting his family regardless of how ruthless they can be to do the right thing, especially in this time of like utter darkness that's beset the world. I really like Sansa's like message to Tyrion, just saying like, I used to think you're the smartest one in Westeros, but apparently you're not. But
where is Sansa getting all this credit from being so, unless it's something I forgot, but where is Sansa getting all this credit to being the smartest and the cleverest? I know that's like reference from a line from Arya that she had said, but I don't see her being that clever or doing anything, but everybody else around her actually fighting and actually executing.
It comes back from back from last season with her old setup of a playing Littlefinger along when Littlefinger thinks he has her under his control after him getting her out of the Dreadfort and getting her out of King's Landing to the Eyrie, and then ultimately winding up with the Boltons, and then coming back to Winterfell. It was that whole season where you think Littlefinger is kind of playing her own on, and Littlefinger's going to get his way with Sansa and Arya. And then at the end of last season, we see that Sansa's been playing him the whole time. That's where Arya gets that respect from Sansa, and having them take out Littlefinger the way they did last season. So that's where that comes about.
Also, she knew how to read and write, which I think is part of that comment. Like, everyone in that family was more. I mean, even the first scene where they're kind of like doing the sweep over the courtyard of Winterfell, and everyone's shooting arrows except Sansa's with is it Sister Elaine or something?
No, that's Old Nan.
Septon.
Old Nan.
Oh, yeah. Old Nan.
Yeah,
it was Old Nan at first, and then it was Septa Olenna.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. So, she's...
Yeah.
So, like, being able to read and write is something that wasn't too terribly common, especially with Arya doing more of, like, the tomboy thing. So she literally... Sansa would be the only comparison. The other thing is, I think you said it, that, like, all these people have died, but somehow Sansa's stayed alive. And so...
Yeah.
I don't know if it's on accident, which I kind of think it is. It's just all accidental because she's kind of an idiot. But there is something to be said to be the right type of idiot, that you could somehow walk away from all of this terrible stuff that's happening around you.
I guess my issue that I was like kind of alluding to is, if she was playing, kind of going off of your point, Brylan, if she was playing Littlefinger this entire time, set her up to die, did she like automatically want to be sort of raped and sort of treated like so poorly by Ramsay? Like, did she have to have Jon come back and take back Winterfell and have all these other like it? That's why, at least for me, that line of her, I can understand her saying like, I used to thought you're the most cleverest person in Winterfell, which I think harkened back to a line of, you think yourself clever or something like that. But when Arya says that she's one of the smartest people she knows, I'm like, what? Like, I'm not sure how you got that far, Arya. Like, that's kind of mind blowing for me. So that's why I had an issue with it.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, she wasn't like setting up Littlefinger to have her go to the Dreadfort and be married to Ramsay Bolton. Yeah, I think that was still Sansa, like one of those things where Sansa had no control over her situation, and she's just being tossed around. But all those situations she learned from, whether it's being engaged to Joffrey or being married to Tyrion or being married to Ramsay, and then ultimately getting Winterfell, reclaiming Winterfell, and being the leader that Jon wasn't being, because he felt a need to go visit Daenerys and win over her trust and everything to get that army to come north. And I think while he's gone, we see a lot of it with the Littlefinger like setup that her and Arya did. But also at the same time, we see at the beginning here, Winterfell's pretty much Sansa's house. She's literally become Ned and Catelyn's child. I mean, she's literally the Lady Wolf, where she will care for her people to probably the biggest, to the utmost end, and then she'll also be very vicious about protecting at the same time.
So I want to point out too that I think it's a misreading of the statement to think that Arya saying Sansa's the smartest person I know to mean Sansa is the smartest person in this whole series. One thing we have to keep in mind about Sansa's character is that I think there's a very, very strong argument to be made that she has survived the absolute worst, like the most horrible shit out of any character that still remains alive. And while she was definitely not in control of her own destiny during most of it, she, like Brian said earlier, she learned from everyone that she encountered. She learned from Cersei. She learned from Littlefinger. She learned from Ramsay. And all these things now have accumulated into the person that she's become by taking over the house, the head of Winterfell, which is what Arya has seen. Arya returned to Winterfell and saw Sansa as she is now. And she can say that among everybody else here, she's the smartest because she knows how to play the Game of Thrones better than anyone here. And I think one of the clearest symbols of that is the fact that when despite Jon's return, despite her loving him and agreeing to like work together with him as siblings, she never once did anything that would turn the North against her. She stayed on the North side the entire time. She got the Northmen to stand to side by her. She spoke on their behalf constantly and still does. And that's not because of some deep-seated love for the North, which I know she has. It's because she's smart enough to see that at the end of the day, if something goes wrong, she needs to know that the Northmen will be behind her, and if they turn against Jon. And Arya sees how she's playing that game, because all Arya does is observe. That's her thing now, and she can see that, and that's why she thinks that Sansa's the smartest person at the moment.
And don't forget about the Knights of the Vale too. She's got them as well.
Yeah.
Anything more do we want to talk about Tyrion before we move on to Arya?
Yeah, just that. I just want to say that Tyrion, this entire episode was like, his character was off for me. Like, he wasn't super sharp and super, flamboyant, or at least uppity. When he spoke in front of the Northmen in the hall, he wasn't his usual like rousing, well-articulated self. He seemed meek. He seemed like almost depressed. And I think that maybe this has something to do with his feelings towards Daenerys and seeing her run off with Jon Snow. But ultimately, regardless of why he's being so meek lately, I think that it's a sign that Tyrion's character is not going to be around at the very end. And that is a bummer, but it's gonna happen. I have the feeling.
I had the entire different read about that.
Oh yeah.
It was to the point where, and I think even Tyrion had said this earlier in seasons, that you have to basically kind of look out for yourself. And the moment that he's sticking his neck out to kind of support and fight for people, that's when a lot of people fucking die. And so once he starts saying that, I just need to look out for myself, that's what I'm going to start doing. I guess the way that I read it was he definitely felt person that is like, oh yeah, like we all have to band together. He's not a Jon. He's not a Rob, right? Like, he's not a Ned. Like, he's not these people that we like, oh, cool, like actually want to kind of get behind this person. Not saying he's a bad person. He's definitely, I think he's the smartest person by far in Westeros. And so that's why I think that line by Sansa saying that she thought he was more clever was like, oh, that's going to come back to bite you, Sansa, for sure. And I know it is. I think by now, at least, carving these things out and looking at this episode, Tyrion and Arya right now are the only two people I can think that will be there by the end. I don't really know about everybody else so far. I can assume Jon, I can assume Dany, but like everybody else is really a fucking toss-up. And I think Tyrion knows exactly at least what he's trying to do. He's trying to kind of rally people behind. That's why I didn't really fit in the scene, but I think his character is probably going to change. Or at least some of the things that he's going to do is probably going to change. And I like the interactions that he was having with the Onion Knight and Varys. Yeah, I like those interactions too, because many times that these characters have been like going through. I mean, these characters have fought on all sorts of sides. Dany has always fought for herself. Jon has fought for a couple different sides, but for them, these are the most surviving people that we've seen so far in the series. That's why I put my money on Tyrion to survive more so than Sansa, for example.
Dany, Jon, and Arya. Those are the only three that I can see make it to the last episode. I can't even say the ending.
I
think Sansa's going to make it because Sansa is going to be the one. It's going to be there when Cersei dies. Cersei has her whole prophecy about how like a woman more beautiful than her is going to like be there, like, or is going to be take her place. I don't think Sansa's going to sit on the Iron Throne, but I think that Cersei is going to die realizing that Sansa was that beautiful one, the one that she stepped on and treated like shit all those years ago.
No, I mean the obvious answer is Arya is good. Arya is definitely killing Cersei, but if she does it,
I did not think Sansa was going to kill Cersei.
Mask, that would be kind of.
No,
well, I was going to say, what do we think?
I'm not saying she's going to kill her.
What do we think about Jaime getting a sex change and then being the more beautiful one? He's a pretty man. He could see some stuff in the North, make him reevaluate how he's living his life and how fleeting life is, and wants to be his true individual.
As long as he tucks and doesn't snip, I think that's okay. Because
he'd be good.
Oh my god.
All right, so
Mocha's internet
Wait,
cut
yeah.
out at like the greatest time.
as long as he tucks and doesn't snip, it literally lost half of his audience right now. It's like, what? Thank you, Mocha.
What's the name of the executioner who took Ned's blade?
Ilan Payne.
Ilan Payne.
Ilan Payne. Yeah, they're
Also,
gonna call
that
him
sounds
Ilan
like
Payne.
a sick
That-
90s rap album. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. Or like rap group. Yo,
Ilan
this is
Payne.
Ilan Payne.
Okay, so let's talk about Arya and Samwell. So
Oh
we
my
talked
God.
a bunch about Sam already, so I don't necessarily know if we need to add too much detail for him. We didn't really talk about Arya, and so we have Arya, Cersei, Bran, and then we have Beric in the gang. So let's talk about Arya, and how do you feel, guys, that, like, what do you feel like? I know we talked about how she's going to kind of go through and probably kind of last throughout the end of the season, last at least through the end of the episode. So, CJ, what do you got for Arya this episode?
So, I mean, we talked about Jon and Arya's reunion, which was like very heartwarming, and that was one of my favorite parts of the episode. I am curious about this weapon she wants Gendry to make. I don't know if y'all got a chance to take a look at a still of that
It's a gun.
picture she gave him. It's not a gun.
Lightsaber with a
Oh
pinecone
my God.
grenade,
Oh my
or it's a cartoon like plunger gun to shoot up the castle.
Yo, Arya's
walls.
getting
I
strapped.
hate that I just tossed that to y'all. I'm going to take that question back. I'm going to go back to her reunion with Gendry and the Hound.
They're gonna bang.
So,
Not Gendry in the house. Like Gendry and Arya.
Hounded
I was gonna say you weren't paying attention.
Why are you trying to kink shame? Why can't Gendry and the How bang? Bro, what's wrong with you, Polka?
Why can't all three?
well, I mean, as we all know from the Battle of Blackwater, the Hound likes to fuck corpses, if y'all remember that.
Mhm.
But those two reunions were like, I thought that was very well done that they did them at the same time. But I was just like so curious as to like, what is this weapon she's having Gendry make? And like, they made a point to show that Gendry's a really good smith. And they was like, oh, like it was really hard to make this like huge blade out of dragon glass. Like, okay, great. Good for you, Gendry. Like, now what does that mean for us going forward as we try to fight this huge army? But I just was like curious what y'all thought about this like weapon she's trying to have made, because like Gendry said, she already has two weapons. She's got a Valyrian steel blade and a needle, and she's very good at using both of those. How many more weapons can she have?
She needs something with dragon glass.
Yeah, well, Valyrian Steel, she doesn't need it with Valyrian Steel.
You gotta
But
have a backup.
true. But the other thing is, I actually did a bit more research, and I broke my own rule. I was like looking through some shit, and I was like, I need to learn what the fuck is this weapon. So the information that I found out so far was that there was an interview that was done by one of the women who is a weapon designer. He's the weapon designer on the throne. Kind of alluded to the fact that it's actually more like a staff that's kind of like a detachable staff. And
Okay.
the best comparison I can think of was like Darth Maul's weapon, but like a little bit kind of detachable, so that on both ends is like a pointy end, which also ties back to, sticking with the pointy end sort of joke that we got from way back when.
Yep.
And so, and it also goes back to Arya's training with the Faceless Men and how she was practicing with the staff, and that's the weapon that they were using. So it has, I have something, I think, and this is just what somebody else said. It could be false, but I don't think the weapons creator would say this, but I don't know, whatever. I think it has something to do with some sort of staff that's pointed on the end that also can detach as a two-handed weapon, because needle is not very good weapon to fight in a battle at all. It's super thin. It's going to break. We've seen Arya only really kind of fight with it sort of once against Brienne, but she probably could like poke and hurt Brienne, but probably not kill. The dagger is probably a really good weapon, but also not very good and feasible in a battle because it's so small and you have to get so close up in close range. So she probably needs something that she can wield in both hands and freely move and attack with speed and more dexterity, and also go back to and have more reach like a staff. So that's as far as all the information that I looked in. I like redacted everything else in my brain that I read in this articles. But I think that's where the weapon's going to go. And if you guys saw, and I didn't see, of course, if you guys saw, they also hinted at and showed a little bit more of the weapon in the season trailer a couple times.
Yeah.
And so don't tell me about it because I don't give a shit. But that's also going to allude to the fact that Arya is going to be fucking some shit up with that weapon.
Yeah, I'm excited to see like kind of her just like going around, just like killing everybody, just doing what she does best. And then maybe if Sarah Farrell came back, that would be great too.
Oh my gosh, bro! I'm pretty sure he's gonna come back.
He is
that
Josh
motherfucker.
Picard.
Yeah. We like. He better come back. If he doesn't come back, I'll be real butthurt of this entire season. Like, he needs to come back. That'd be amazing. Or some sort of nod to him, right? Like, if he doesn't come back in the flesh, right, there's something that left or some sort of residual, like, something that would be dope.
I agree.
You know, what I dig about that Gendry and Hound scene is that we definitely seen Gendry get a lot of upward mobility in his life since getting away from King's Landing. So it's really cool to see him. Like, he went from just being this guy wandering around with Beric Dondarrion's crew, like taking care of their weapons and stuff, and now he's in charge of all of Winterfell's forges. He's Tony Stark in that dragon glass, making crazy ass shit for everybody.
Still don't know how he was a virgin.
Yeah.
Don't know how. But anyway,
Well, Melisandre, didn't she?
She did, yes. But I'm talking about before that. Before, like,
Gotcha.
how was he a virgin? Anyways, continue. Continue,
Because he looks so good. Cuthbert want to get in the pants, bro.
Yeah.
Get it.
But if he like makes like dragon glass suit of armor and like has a dragon glass like warhammer that he comes out with, it'll be awesome to see that.
He needs to put on that helmet because we know that he has a hammer and he has a helmet. So the only bummer thing about Gendry is that he still haven't actually fought. And as far as we know, Robert Baratheon was probably one of the best fighters, top, 5-10 fighters in the entire universe of the Game of Thrones.
He fought some White Walkers. He hasn't fought like an all-scale war, but he's fought some White Walkers.
No, I mean,
he didn't.
He ran away. He
fought for a bit and then he ran.
Oh, that doesn't count. I mean, like, looking at that group of warriors, it's like,
we know he knows how to swing his hammer, so we know that when it comes to the craziness, that it'll be awesome to see him fight.
Okay, what else do you got here, Brylan?
Just like CJ said, like that moment with Arya and the Hound and Gendry was fantastic. It's going to be really cool to see where that leads up. I get a feeling that we see like the way Hound and Arya talk to one another. That they're both like just reminding each other of the despicable things they've done, but also they have a mutual respect for one another. And I think ultimately, like, even though the Hound like is very reluctant to show like and say to Arya, "Hey, I respect you and I care about you," we're gonna see something happen where I think like the Hound is gonna save her life in some way, and that might be like the curtain call on the Hound at that time.
Yeah, I just see that. I really want to see that interaction, but when Brienne and all three of them gets back in sort of one, and also with Pod, right? I need to see all of them back in like one area again. I think that would be great. Blue, anything else you got about Arya before we talk about Cersei?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, Blewett, start us off and talked about Cersei, because we actually talked about her a little bit. She's hanging out still in King's Landing.
Waiting for those elephants.
Yeah, the amount of memes that came out from this one episode is absolutely amazing. So, bravo to all the creative people that's out there. Talk to us about Cersei, because I know that she's with Euron, and she still has what's his name, Brylan?
The Mountain.
Yeah.
No,
they call him Sir Robert Strong.
Okay,
and then Qyburn.
Oh, and also she also has
Bronn.
Yeah, there's no way that Bronn's gonna kill
what's going on
any of those two people. There's no way.
I wouldn't put it past Bronn. I mean, we know that he's had fun hijinks and adventures with, Jaime and I was about to say Viserion, but Jaime and Theon both in the past. But we know that Braun's his whole motivation is how much you're going to pay me to do the job you want me to do. He knows what his skill set is and what he can pull off. And if someone pays the right price, Braun might just betray anybody.
Yeah.
But who do you think is going to kill Braun? Like, how does Braun die at the end of this? What do you guys think?
Tyrion kills Braun, saving Jaime's life, and Tyrion dies.
Wow.
A castle falls on top of him. So he gets the
Jamie's gonna
castle.
kill Braun.
That would be
James
If
gonna
he
kill Braun.
dies, Jamie kills Braun, ooh, in a battle,
Definitely,
in a
because-
fight?
I don't know. That wouldn't be that hard.
Braun being the one who helped him train to get back into swordplay after he lost his hand. So they already have a connection there of constantly sparring. And I think that he'll be the one probably protecting Tyrion to land the final blow on Braun.
I don't know. Cersei, to me, like, isn't necessarily an interesting plot line. She's more of an interesting plot device. Like, ultimately, she's going to die. Ultimately, she's going to lose. Like, I can pretty safely say that. I know Game of Thrones is great with its twists, but that is going to be a cathartic experience watching her go down. And it's just how hard she swings when she goes down is going to be the interesting point. Like, she's still got, you know, the only undead, well, formerly the only undead thing south of the wall. She has a lot of very interesting things that can happen, but ultimately that arc's closed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, aside from Cersei just plotting her machinations and continuing to go along with, like, how can I still cause some havoc and keep ourselves protected from this danger that's happening, whether it's holding off forces or buying someone to actually take out her brothers so she just doesn't have that annoyance in her life anymore. I think it's still the Cersei that people love to see being very conniving and Mr. Burnsy just like twiddling her fingers like that. But man, I hate Euron. This is like the worst character that he ever introduced. I'm glad that after this series is over, I'll still have Book Euron to look forward to cleanse myself of this crappy Euron depiction that they made. Yeah, I mean, this guy that's just all motivated by that he wants to have sex with Cersei, and that's all he's doing this shit for. Plus, he's just batshit crazy. It's just a weak writing is just the weakest part of the series, I think. Yeah. And after like the little song and dance routine they do in the throne room where Cersei's like, you gotta earn your queen, which will be on everybody's like Instagram probably this week. That she still lets him come back to her bedchamber and have sex with her. It's just like, all right, what was the point of any of that you just did?
I have an idea as to what the point might be.
Yeah.
It was have sex and make a baby.
Nope.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. So right now there is a secret that only Cersei and Jaime know about, and that's the fact that Cersei's pregnant with Jaime's kid. Cersei is very mad at Jaime, and she doesn't want him to probably have anything to do with this kid. So I think what she's doing is pulling exactly what she did to her last husband. She is letting Euron fuck her, so that way she can claim that the child is his, and that way Jaime will have no claim to the throne or the prince or princess or whatever at all. And I wouldn't be surprised if she killed him if she killed Euron once they made a declaration that he knocked her up. I think it's just more like politicking on her side. And yeah, it's kind of like history repeating itself in a way too.
Yeah, and Sir Maury Povich of Bravos will come out and give the results.
Yo, seriously, that would be amazing. I'm so down for that. That'd be great.
Was
I do have
anyone else
one.
worried that they were going to introduce young Griff there for a little while? Just
No.
like last
It's
season.
way too late for young Griff.
I was going to say,
too
that'd be
late.
so amazing. It's just like very last season. They're like, hold up, we have another major player.
No, it's not like Smash Brothers and other players that are challenged or
New
anything.
challengers enter.
And he's Targaryen.
The only character you could do that with the books from is Strong Belwalls, and you could just have him have a Hulk entrance where he just like rolls in and just starts punching dragons. That's
Yeah,
the only
Strong
person you
Belwalls.
could do.
The second worst thing after the show's depiction of Euron is the show's decision not to include Strong Belwas.
Yes.
All right, so it looks like we feel pretty almost finished. I'll end with you, CJ, before we start talking about Beric Dondarrion and the gang.
Yeah, my last point on Cersei is I really would not put it past her. She tried to make a deal with the Night King. Like, she would be like, oh, like, Qyburn, like, try and, like, figure out a way to talk to the Night King to, like, screw over Jaime and everyone up in the north to try. Like, we know, at least as far as we know, that the Night King is not someone that you can negotiate with. But her, like, just her hubris, like, I just can totally imagine her saying, let me try and negotiate with this dude and see what happens.
I like your theory, CJ. I usually don't say I like anybody on this show, so I really like your theories. I feel like we need to kick Mocha off and have you on here because you're a cool dude.
He's not half the man I am.
That'd make me a quarter man.
So CJ, let's talk about the last two characters because I do want to end on Bran because I feel like
fuck Bran.
I feel like we need to talk about him. So let's talk a little bit about, and now I don't think this is going to be too lengthy because we only saw Beric D and the rest of the dudes. I think the one thing I do want to mention and kind of talk about this episode is what do you think that symbol means? Because that's something that has been scattered everywhere, all the way from the first episode to now we see the little Umber boy kind of stuck on the wall. Little Umber. So what do you feel about what's going on with Beric Dondarrion and how they were actually kind of looking through little is it called Little Hearth or Last Hearth?
Last Hearth.
What do you think that symbol means?
So we see that symbol in this episode. We see that symbol on when they were beyond the wall in remind me what that place is beyond the wall. When they did the spiral with the horses. No.
It was the Hand of the First Men.
Thank you. I saw that spiral symbol there, as well as in the stone on Dragonstone, like the drawings of the children of the forest. I feel like the Night King is trying to hark back to this moment of when I was created. Like, you created me, or you are the reason that you created, like, that I've been created. Now I'm going to take you down. Like, thinking about when Children of the Forest created the Night King in order to combat man and the expansion of man. And so now it's like, okay, because of you, I've been created, and now because of me, you will be destroyed. And I think they are trying to like hark back to this moment of creation of, okay, I was created because of you, and now I will take you down.
Because like the AI, sort of like a robot, sort of, I meet my creator to ascend, to be better. Rylan?
Yeah, I mean, the Night King was essentially a weapon made to stop the First Men from invading the Children of the Forest lands. But this scene is really cool, one, because it probably has the best line in the show when Dolorous and Tormund meet up with one another, and Dolorous just like, watch out, he's got blue eyes. And Tormund's just like, I have always had blue eyes. And the Wildlings and the Night's Watch are probably some of the best characters that we get very little time with, but it's just fun to watch them interact, and that they're these just hardcore badass survivors that will take on anything that comes their way just because they've seen it all. But as far as the symbol and everything, it does kind of look like a hurricane to me. So I think the Night's King is actually like a weatherman from the past. And it's just like, hey, hurricane season's coming. We got battened down.
You're gonna troll. Oh, I hate you.
No, but I thought it was interesting that, like the little Umber kid, may he rest in peace. That I don't know if they set it up on purpose. Did the Night King actually set it up on purpose where the whole thing will catch on fire, or is that just something that to make it look fanciful once he actually burned up and actually see the fire spread? Because once the fire spreads, it kind of looks like the Targaryen dragon symbol, which I thought was really interesting.
That is interesting.
I just think little kids are flammable in general, more so than we realize.
All the asbestos in their blood.
Mocha, continue. What do you think the symbol means and about that section of the episode?
Yeah, I don't think I haven't put too much thought into the symbol. I don't see it as anything more than just the Night King's crest, in a sense. Crests are a big part of the story and the mythos throughout the kingdoms, and for him, it's a twisted one because his crest is the symbol of the spell that was used to bring him back in the first place by the children of the forest. So I think it's more of like almost like a morbid expression of himself in the world that they all live in, despite him being very much otherworldly and not belonging there at all.
Blew it. Finish this off.
Yeah, I same thing. There's nothing too, but it was a good jump scare. Well shot scene. I loved any scene with Tormund in it, and so that worked. But he's one of my favorite characters. Ironically enough, or not ironically, because that's not actually what ironically means, but book and movie for different reasons. Like his book portrayal is phenomenal, and his TV show portrayal is equally as good.
You said movie. I was like, "This is a Game of Thrones movie." Am I missing?
Yeah, I know. You know,
Coming soon.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that scene, especially how short that it was. I think I'm glad that they didn't waste too much time and they really got to like the big thing in that scene, the big reveal, the burn it down, and they really kind of cut away because it feels as though that's where the show is going to be going in the season. So I'm glad that the scene was short, sort of contained lots of shit impact for me very, very quickly, and then going away. I'm really down. I'm really glad they actually continued to do some things like that. I think they also did it. They did that a few different times too. I think one of the times was also in the Citadel a few times. So I thought that was actually pretty cool when Sam and I can't remember the actual maester that Sam was sort of being a steward for, but there was like a lot of books and shit that was scattered around. So there's a lot of information being on the scene.
You mean Forrest Slughorn?
Yeah, I was gonna say Professor Slughorn. See, this is why I like you, DJ. This is why I like you, bro. Yeah, as far as the symbols, like the symbolism, what that mean, I'm not sure yet. I haven't necessarily obsessed over just yet. I'm probably going to come back to that a little bit later on. I think it's going to be something larger, but also something simplistic, much like Amoga. I think there's definitely a meaning for it because it's everywhere. I also need to make sure that I need to plot back just to see, because the first episode, it shows up one of the first things that we see, all those scattered bounty pots all around. And so now that we start to see it in certain areas, I'm curious if we can go back and see, where are all the areas that we've seen it? Because we talked about, we saw it in, Beyond the Wall. We now saw it in Last Hearth. And so where literally has that, carving been placed, and what's the symbolism or the importance of it? So I'll hold my thoughts for that a little bit later.
I think to go along with just it being just simply, I'm the Night King, this is my sigil, like, I'm coming for you. Like, it's just going to be tough to explain that all in 5 episodes. So,
I mean, I think they've already started. Yeah, I think CJ, I think they've already explained it. We just don't know the connections yet. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. We have all the information, and it's almost as if we already know what's going to happen. We're just waiting for the right moment. We're just waiting for our friend to show up in Winterfell before everything can kind of fall into place. Kind of like Bran, the last character we're going to talk about. So, what do you guys? You don't like? So CJ, why don't you like Bran? What's going on with this?
So Bran, like, he's just sitting around, not doing anything, just being like, "There's no time. The Night King has your dragon." Like, bro, chill out. We just met each other. Like, I don't know why you're like yelling at me, first of all. and then the rest of the episode, he's just sitting in the courtyard, just chilling, waiting for Jaime. I'm just like, fuck you, dude. Like, do something useful with your life.
It'd be great. Like, next episode opens up and Bran like sees Jaime and he's just standing there, and then Bran just jumps up out of his wheelchair, runs up and busts him in the face.
That would be great. But in all seriousness, there's just so much going on with Bran, but also absolutely nothing. Because it's like, is he actually there? Is this him looking back on it on the time? Is this like, there's just so much to like parse out with him that I just can't fathom and comprehend. his character right now in this point in time, if he's really there.
I've always liked Bran throughout the entire series. I think I still look at him as being one of my favorite, by far one of the most interesting, by far one of the most well acted child actors, and now I guess an adult
Was
actor.
Rickon your second favorite? Like,
Yeah,
what?
bro.
This is a hot take right
So,
now.
Turn left, turn right, and the other direction, then straight.
Well, the reason why I like Bran was the fact that we actually seen, like, this was the first time that it's about the warging. He was the first person that had like a connection. Like that's why I like his character and all the theories with the Bran the Builder, the Brands that's in the actual history in the past. That's why I tend to like his character more. And this is not the first time I've said that. That's definitely not a hot take. So fuck you, Mike. But the one thing I
Yeah,
do
Mocha.
want to actually kind of sorry, fuck you, Mocha. So the thing that I was really keen on was all of his lines, and I went back and started rewatching. I'm probably going to rewatch it again. And the line that stood out for me was when we finally get Jon and Bran's sort of reunion. Jon comes up, runs up to him, hugs him, and kisses him on the forehead. And the last time that Jon and Bran has been in the same freaking area was episode 2, season 1, right? And Bran was in a coma when Jon had to leave, and the last thing that Jon did was kiss him on the forehead as a brother, right? And so I love both of those dudes are just amazing in that particular kind of scene. And the thing that stood out to me was Jon said, "Oh, Bran, like, look at you. You're a man now." And Bran looks at him in his deadpan face and said, "Well, not yet." And that is
Almost.
what really, that was really got me. I was like, what does he mean? Because is he going to either A, pass the power on, B, is he going to turn, like, I was kind of curious. And literally everything that Bran does, I'm all for it. So, especially because he kind of fucked up Hodor and everything. So that's why I liked him. Yeah. Fan theory, I'm all about it. Holla at your boy.
I got a fan theory that Jaime, to kind of like his final act of redemption, just tells Bran to say, "Hey, take my body." And
that's interesting.
Bran would be Jaime again, but I don't think that'll happen because there is this whole three-eyed raven thing. And don't get me started on the three-eyed raven. I don't think we'll fully ever understand what is the purpose of the three-eyed raven, or maybe that's the ultimate like thing that the Night King is fighting against, which is some people's theories, but they never really clearly define and explain exactly what is the three-eyed raven, aside from this individual that has this omnipotence of being able to see what's going on in the world just because of connection of nature and everything. I have a feeling that part of being the three-eyed raven is he actually has to carry the previous three-eyed ravens in his body, so I think that person is not dead. They're actually living inside of Bran. There's like a mutual cohabitation happening right now, just because Bran wouldn't know everything without that person's help. But I feel that they kind of left the audience in the dark about the three-eyed raven, and we still just don't understand what is his role going to play. And so they got to kind of fill time with him staring at people all the time. And hopefully there's a big payoff to it, because it's going to be very subtle notes, I think, coming from Bran, that we need like some type of crazy ass, whether it's super high fantasy event happen from him or something very significant beyond just being the one that knows that Jon is a Targaryen.
Well, so a couple things. First of all, I think, like we were talking about with Jon, where once the audience knows, because these characters don't have cell phones and don't live on the same block as each other, there's no easy way of communicating. So you can't necessarily go around. It's tough to see the same thing of the same characters figuring out like the same information. So I think once the audience gets the reveal on the payoff of Bran and like what he really means, that's it. Like you just end it. I think that's probably going to be the last episode. Is he's going to do something cool, some baller crap happens, and then the show ends, and it all, that's what you're talking about the next day. the other thing is that I thought that Three-Eyed Raven was pretty well defined. Let's go to the other big fantasy. I thought he was like the wizards in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, where it seems like there's these overall gods, right? You know, the new gods, the old gods, the god of light, and then it seems like, because his big thing was that, you know, you communicate through the trees, right? The were trees, right? I think that's the name of them.
Yeah, werewood trees.
Yeah, the werewood. And so, you know, how like certain areas got a little bit cloudy and obscured because their their were trees had got cut down. And so to me, it just seems like this intermediary level of like, there's the overall gods, and then they have like their representatives on the planet, on I almost said Middle Earth, Westeros and Essos and all that fun stuff. And then you have the common people below that. So he's just an intermediary, like a medium to the gods, because he's definitely linked to the old gods.
The old gods and the new.
Which, by the way, we don't know who the hell's right. You know, they've somewhat alluded to there is an actual, like, someone's right in the show, but they've given significant evidence for every single religion to be like somewhat, except for the new gods. The new gods don't really get a ton, but
I think they're taking an approach that, like, a similar approach to what like the ancient Greeks and Romans had, which was everyone's gods exist, and your god was strong if you didn't lose wars. I think that's the kind of approach they're taking, is that everyone's gods exist. We've seen proof. We've seen magic that can be linked to the worship of Rielor. We've seen magic that can be linked to the old gods, through Bran's communication through the werewood trees. And we don't know really much about the Seven. But that being said, or in terms of their actual like representations of acts in the real world, but still, like, we've seen things that could potentially be linked. Unless these are all coincidences or things like magic exists in the world, but is actually a science, not something, a gift from the divine. I don't think they're going to get that deep into it, but I do think that most of the approach is that all the gods exist. It's just a matter of who's the strongest at the moment.
It'll be very interesting to see if, I don't know if this is going to happen, but if Bran and Melisandre meet up, because like I feel like they'll have a lot to talk about, and like see how much the like old gods can communicate with R'hllor, and you know, is there this great other that then like R'hllor and the old gods need to fight together to be able to defeat? I think that's going to be an interesting conversation, because we know Melisandre's going to come back. We just don't know how or when she's going to.
Where's Melisandre?
She's in Volantis, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah, she went to Volantis, I think.
Why did she go there? I can't.
Because she was banished by Jon.
Yeah, and she told Seth of Varys before she left that like she's gonna die in Westeros just like he is.
Where did she go to Ashai?
No, she went to Volantis.
Okay.
No, she didn't go to Ashai.
All right, guys, I think we're good. I'll leave it off to like some lasting thoughts, a couple of tidbits that we may have not necessarily mentioned. You know, we didn't talk about Theon and the Greyjoys and the things like that. I know we didn't talk about everything, but I do kind of want to leave it off of, you know, what makes you sort of excited, you know, sort of the lasting question for this season, episode 2 that airs on Sunday. I'll start with Mocha.
Shit's about to pop off. I think as of episode 2, it's going to get wild. It's going to get crazy. And I'm so glad that they got through all of the checklist. Make sure so-and-so meets so-and-so. Make sure so-and-so learns about this. Now, get it all out of the way. And let's just get some brutal, horrific zombie on fleshy man fights for the rest of the season. Or at least for the next 2 episodes.
Blew it.
Yeah, I think it's going to get wild. To me, this was a very good just recap. This is what we're going to talk about this season. Let's get into it.
Rylan.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good like setup episode for this season. I didn't love it. I think they had I think one thing I wanted to see is show us a moment of the Night's King and his army, just how how omnipotent they can be with their power. So I think either Last Hearth or even the Dreadfort, just seeing them marching towards Winterfell, just show like one of those major castles just literally leveled to the ground and set on fire and just utterly destroyed, just to show how ruthless and how unstoppable they are, just to ramp up the tension a bit. The symbol really neat, but I don't think it actually either, unless they're going to do something with that symbol, if it's a key to beating the Night King, doesn't really have the same payoff as the oncoming doom as just seeing it in action.
If it's a symbol to beat the Night King, why would he be just? I'll be really upset if they use it.
Hey, this is the key to my heart.
Hey, this is how you kill me. But don't read into it. Last but not least, CJ.
I think what I'm interested in for next week is just seeing how Jaime can seeing how he fits into this puzzle of all these characters that are now in Winterfell, and how he kind of passes the test of, okay, he's cool. Like, who does he need to like connect with? Who does he need to talk to try and like fit into this world up in Winterfell to, fight for the living, as much as he's like said he's wanted to do that. So I'm very excited to see how Jaime fits in next week in this episode.
I wonder if Bran's going to come to bat for him. Like, I wonder if Bran's going to be that person to be like, you can't kill him. We need him.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Possibly,
he's not really Bran anymore. That's the thing.
Yeah, everybody's thinking of Bran like, oh, something's going to happen because, Jaime pushed Bran out the window. But, I mean, if we go back to things we didn't even see in the show, which is Jaime killed Aerys Targaryen.
Yeah.
And so when he confronts Daenerys, that's going to be an interesting conversation.
I mean, Jaime killed a bunch of fucking people. I think literally, if we look at almost everybody that's there, Jaime killed just about almost everybody's best friend or father in this conversation. So we'll in Winterfell. So that's going to be kind of funny. And with that, thanks everybody. Thank you, Brylan. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it too.
Thanks, Blewett. I appreciate your time.
I don't mind it.
Thanks, Mocha. I appreciate your face. Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Appreciate that.
Fuck you. CJ, we appreciate you so much. Thanks for joining us. Where can people find more of your work on the internet, CJ?
First of all, thanks for having me. And you can definitely follow me on Twitter at IamCuthbert1, CUTHBERT. If you want to check out some more takes on Game of Thrones, I'll be posting some more soon.
Nice. Check out more of our work at downinfrontpodcast.com. We're on Twitter at _DAFP, Facebook.com/downinfrontpodcast. If you like what we do, you want to support us, Patreon.com/downinfrontpodcast. This is going to be exciting. Stay tuned for more of our work. We probably will be back next week, ? So stay tuned for that, and we'll see what we got. So long, Pharrell, and I'm going to get drunk real soon.
Bye. Children are flammable, and I can prove it. Tune in next time.
Fuck Brand.
Unless they're children of